You know, once upon a time, people stood shoulder to shoulder and read the same headlines. Today, 10 people stand together and read 10 different worlds on their phones. That's not progress, that's fracture. So how did we get here? How did we get to this point where society seems so disconnected? Well, there's multiple points to this, so let's break it down. First, news stopped being a service and it became a business. Now, don't get me wrong, this happened many years ago, but we have to talk about it. So there was a time when news was a civic duty. It was a service that was performed. The paper on your doorstep, the nightly broadcast at 6 p.m. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and it had its own set of problems, but it was shared. The Toronto Star ran a photo. There's this crowd of strangers that were all standing together but silently reading the same headline about 9/11. It was a common story. It was a common shock, but if you fast forward to today, that same crowd would be staring at their phones and none of them would be reading the same thing. One would see a conspiracy, one would see a meme, one would see a hot take. Why is that? Well, the news isn't built to inform anymore. It is built to keep you scrolling. So when information is engineered for emotion, for profit, we stop being a public, we stop being a people, and we just become a marketplace of outrage. The next point, brilliant thinker Marshall McLuhan warned us that the electronic age would drag us back into an age of tribalism.
Oh no, tribal people, one of their main kinds of sport is sort of butchering each other. It's a full-time sport in tribal societies.
But I had some ideas. We got global and tribal. We were going to become
the closer you get together, the more you like each other.
Yeah.
There's no evidence of that in any situation that we've ever heard of. That when people get close together, they get more and more savagely impatient with each other.
Well, why is that? Because of the nature of man, or
his tolerance is tested in those narrow circumstances very much.
And he was right, but he didn't even predict how bizarre some of these tribes would become. Now, you can belong to a tribe that believes that birds are government drones, or one that thinks that cryptocurrencies and the blockchain will replace nation states, or one that is convinced that the world actually ended in 2012 and we're living now in a simulation. Social media isn't just communication, it's architecture. And that means that it creates self-contained villages of belief where everything just works because everyone inside wants it to. It's like Peter Pan. If you will it hard enough, Tinkerbell will just appear. Well, we no longer live in a single society. We no longer share an experience. We live in a kaleidoscope, a twisted kaleidoscope of fantasy tribes, and each one is certain that theirs is the one with the insight into what is the real world. This third point almost ties back to the first, and it's very important as well. Institutions just squandered our trust. For decades, leaders assumed that we just keep believing, but income inequality, all sorts of things, these gaps grew wider, and the 2008 financial crisis showed us that incompetence at the top ends up getting bailed out while failure at the bottom gets punished. It even gets mocked. So COVID revealed governments making rules that they didn't follow themselves. We saw scientists sort of contradicting themselves and elites flying private while they were preaching the virtues of sacrifice. In Canada, in Europe, across the West, immigration policy built islands of isolation rather than a shared sort of citizenship. Assimilation wasn't encouraged, so parallel economies, parallel subcultures, parallel societies started to form, and people stopped seeing themselves as part of one singular nation. And when the pandemic hit, it seems like whatever glue still remained completely dissolved. So now, people don't even agree on what their country is. The next point we have to cover has got to be the collapse of shared time. There was a rhythm once. Church on Sunday, news at 6, sports on Saturday. Now, everyone's out of sync. They're doing their own thing. One person is binging Netflix at 3 a.m. and another is doom scrolling Twitter before dawn. We don't just lack shared stories, we lack a shared clock. And a society without rhythm, that's not a society. It's just noise and a bunch of people. Finally, point number 5, we have to discuss algorithms completely just replaced editors. So editors used to be flawed humans, but that they had decent judgment over time. Now, it's the algorithm that decides what you see, not because it's true, but because it's sticky, it's profitable. The result is that we don't have a public square anymore. We have 1,000 echo chambers, each one tuned to maximize attention. And attention, it isn't truth, it's addiction. Let's talk about the pandemic, think about it. Lockdowns turned us almost fully digital, fully algorithmic. For one person, COVID was the deadliest threat of our time, but for another, it was a complete hoax. The same virus, two completely different worlds because the algorithm tailored your reality to your tribe. That wasn't just disagreement, it was a rupture in the fundamental basis of reality itself. So how can we start to undo some of this? How can we start to come back together? Well, first, when you consume news, ask, am I being informed or am I being entertained into outrage? Test your tribe. Step outside the feed and ask, could I explain the other side's viewpoints in their own words? Can I strongman their side of the argument? Don't confuse the failure of institutions. This is the next point. Don't confuse the failure of institutions with the absence of reality. A broken mirror still reflects something. The rules to remember here are simple. First, a society without a shared story is no society at all. Next, tribes built on fantasy can't govern reality. And third, trust is easier to squander than it is to rebuild and reestablish. Other people are going to keep sinking deeper into their tribes, into their feeds, into their curated fantasies, but you're going to step back. You're going to look across this fracture and you're going to see it clearly for what it actually is, not the end of society, but the test of whether we can continue to build one.